That's their business, to keep us in a place that we're actually not healing. We are entangled to those that came before us. We can actually choose now how we want to live.
In this enlightening episode of the I Am Painfree podcast, I am Rob Renee, and I'm welcoming Brian Bernaman, a pioneer in the field of conscious living. Brian, the co-founder of Conscious Action, and You, being you, merges his experience in neuroscience with over 15 years of holistic wellness practice. His unique approach blends ancient wisdom with modern science, offering a fresh perspective on the well-being that's resonated with audience worldwide. Brian shares his transformational journey from his childhood in Buenos Aires, where he had amazing parents who introduced him to these techniques and theories at a young age. It's just amazing how early he started working with this. But then he talks about his immersive experience in Tibetan Buddhist practices in California. Spent a number of years studying specifically related to that. Spent quite a bit of time in the States. And now he's living his current life, has been there for about 9 years in New Zealand. But throughout the episode, he discusses his personal path that shaped his mission and guide to help individuals with a more mindful, balanced, and purpose-driven existence. He's really entertaining. Brian's story is one of resilience, self-discovery, and a deep commitment to promoting intentional, heart-connected living. So join us for a few minutes to talk about Brian's holistic approach to health, well-being, and exploring this amazing work. He's done energy healing, mindfulness, somatic healing, and he discovered his methods. He went through, at the end, all 5 modalities that he's experienced and practices on. And there's one that I hadn't heard of. Let's stick around and see if it's something you've heard of. And let me know, drop some comments and let me know what you think. But Brian's an amazing man, and here he is. Hey, welcome to the I Am Pain-Free podcast. This is Rob Renee, your host. And I got an exciting guest today, Brian Bernaman, which is exciting to have you here. Just it's amazing to see the people that we're getting on the show. It's a lot of fun just because your experiences are so varied. And Brian's just got an awesome story. So I'm super excited to get into it and learn more about him and how he's helping people. So he's been doing it for a long time. So got lots of experience that I'm sure all of us are going to learn from. So Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for creating this space. Yeah, I'm looking forward to share a little bit about my story and what I do. And if one person resonates with it and takes something away from it, awesome.
That's right. And that's all better. If we can just help one person along the way each day or time, then we're making progress. So I really appreciate you. So why don't you, since most people don't know your story, at least I didn't know your story. So before doing some research on you, I would love for you to tell the audience what makes you and how did you get to what you're doing today?
Yeah, beautiful. I'm going to do the short version. The long version takes around 37 years. So I'm going to do the
let's make it a little bit shorter.
One of the main things is I grew up in Buenos Aires in Argentina, big city, regular childhood. And then at one point during my childhood, my parents started to actually get interested in personal development, a spiritual well-being path. And little by little, I started to notice things at home that were slightly different. And I was fortunate that my parents did that, because then I had some gateways as I was a teenager to explore all of that. At that moment, when I was a kid growing up, I was playing sports, going to school, a lot of the typical things. And at the same time, I was a little of an outsider, doing things that perhaps not all of my friends were doing, especially when becoming 13, 14 years old, where everybody's trying different things and exploring different things. I wasn't connected to that, so I decided to be the loser of my group, because I wasn't choosing to smoke, or I wasn't choosing to explore with alcohol, just because I was seeing how that was detrimental for people.
Good for you. You had good awareness even when you were young. That's amazing.
But I had a lot of addictive personality. And
Ah,
so I thought that if I try a cigarette, I'm going to get hooked to it. If I drink alcohol, I'm going to get to be an alcoholic. And I was seeing growing up a lot of people that were doing that, and I didn't like the experience of them. So I was like, okay, let's just make the sensible choice here and do that, even though I was being pressured by all of my friends to do that.
right.
And I decided I'm going to be okay being the outsider, being the loser. I don't care. And at the same time, with all of that, one of the main things that kept on occurring for those years, which I didn't know up until that moment, was that my parents always asked me how I was doing every single day, how are you? How are you? And I was always like, I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay. And they would always tell me, but what's really happening? And for me, I didn't understand that question. And it wasn't until I started to explore a few different practices that I'm going to share in a moment that I realized actually I had zero connection with my body. I had no idea how I was feeling. I was just in my mind and I was super stressed out, super anxious, super worried a lot of the time. But I didn't know that was the case.
Oh, interesting. That's interesting. They were looking at you saying there might be something wrong. So they're trying to ask you those questions and explore. And you didn't at that time have the connection
Yes.
between your mind and body. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yeah. And so I started like my parents to me and my siblings when we were teenagers, they invited us to go to different classes, like different yoga classes or meditation classes or sound healings or energy healings. For some reason, I said yes. My siblings didn't, or to most of it, they didn't.
Right.
I recognized something there. And I remember some of the first experiences that were transformational for me. They brought me back to my body. I remember the first class ever that I did of a form of Tibetan yoga, that
Okay.
it was the first time that I actually felt my body and I felt the feelings in my body. And I
Wow.
was like, okay, now I understand that I was super disconnected. I remember the
Interesting.
first time that I went to a Reiki healing. I was like, wow, there's something there. And I decided that I wanted to learn how to do this and I wanted to explore more. And through especially my late teenage years, like 15, 16, 17, 18, those years, I started to explore a lot of these different modalities, techniques, traditions, reading all of these different books that my parents were recommending. And at the same time, I started to notice, especially with certain aspects of my life, how those practices were actually having an impact on my daily life. So, as an example, I used to drive, like in Argentina, when you're 16, like you start driving. And I was so stressed out driving. I had anger, I had road rage, and all of that. And one day, I remember that after some of these practices, I'm driving and someone cut me off, and my usual response would be like, F you, and all of. And I just noticed that someone cut me off, and I was like, there's a lot of like energy building up inside of me, but I didn't react. I just
Oh,
noticed it.
interesting.
And little by little, I started to notice that I was more in control of how I was responding to my circumstances instead of reacting.
Oh,
And
interesting.
so I was like, okay, there's something in all of this that I'm practicing. So I started to go even further into all of that. And I decided as well at some point I was going to university and doing all of the regular things as well. I did my postgrad in neuroscience, that I decided like I wanted to understand a little bit more how our brain works and how all of the things that I've been practicing actually I can explain them more logically.
Right.
And then I moved away. I bought a one-way ticket to New York, and
And
that
how old were you
started.
when you did this again?
I was 22,
Wow. Wow.
and
You said, "Here
yeah,
I come," huh?
yeah, I had finished. No, I was like, I finished. I did two bachelors, and then my postgrad in 5 years. I was working on the radio as a journalist, and I decided that's it. A relationship ended, so I'm like, I'm getting out of here, and I'm exploring the world as I
Wow.
explore myself. So I lived
Interesting.
in between a few different places, and then at one point back in 2012, I decided to move to California to a
Uh,
Tibetan Buddhist retreat center in the middle of the mountain, and I lived there for a
wow.
few years.
How did you get connected to that? Was it just through your relationships and people that you had met in New York, or
No,
what took you to California? How did you get to find
so
that Tibetan center?
yeah, so I actually the Tibetan yoga practices that I did back in Argentina as a teenager, the Tibetan Lama, that is the one that teaches this specific lineage, he actually lives in this space in California. So I
Ah,
was told already when I was learning about these practices about that place in California.
got it.
So I was like, after living in New York and I lived in Miami and then I lived in Europe for a while, and I decided I want to immerse myself fully in all of this, specifically in the Tibetan Buddhist teachings. I wanted to go a little bit deeper and understand how do I actually live this and not just a few hours per day. How do I
Mhm.
actually bring this to be part of my life and really embody all of these teachings. So I ended up there, and it was
Wow.
such a beautiful experience and so much depth, because being able to live there for a few years and have nothing else to do other than living there, being with me, with my practices, and the work that I'm doing in the community,
Right.
that was huge in my path. And then at one point, after a few years, the universe had other plans for me. So I had to explore other places. My work visa was extension was denied. So from one day to the
Ah,
next, I had to leave the country. And
so you had
then
to go back to Argentina? Is that right?
I went there just to visit my family. But then I was like, okay, I'm
Now
going
you're off to
away
somewhere
again.
else, huh?
And after some months in Europe, I ended up in New Zealand. And now I've been in New Zealand for over 9 years.
Wow.
So yeah, that's a condensed version of a little
Yeah,
bit of
that's an
my personal
exciting.
path.
Obviously, there's lots of things we could talk about and unpack, but it sounds very interesting. Just to summarize part of it, when you were learning as a child, you were learning the Tibetan. What do you call it? The Tibetan.
Tibetan Buddhism or Tibetan yoga meditation practices.
Okay, gotcha. And then you'd known about the center that was in California through even your childhood, and then you end up spending a couple of years in California. But that was a really neat experience there. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it,
exciting.
it was great. I often say to people, I think that those years there, for me, that was like a lifetime.
Mm,
And the learnings that I had there, I think that if I hadn't gone there, it would have taken me around 20, 30, 40 years to get to the same place of understanding about myself that I got there in those years.
wow. So instead of 20 to 40, you did it in two, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. So now that in you're in New Zealand, right? So
Yes.
in New Zealand, what do you do for a job or a daily, task, and how are you helping people in New Zealand?
Yeah, so now when I came to New Zealand, in a sense, it's starting over. Nobody knows you here. So little by little, allowing people to explore all of the different things that I do in terms of well being, mental health, healing. So the different ways that I work through the years has been a lot of workshops and events and retreats all around all of these topics, working one on one with people, whether that's through healing energetically, somatically, with sound healing, with ancestral healing, with inner child healing, mental health. I teach at university here, so I've been teaching for the last 5 years at the university here around mental health, dealing with stress and self doubt, resilience. I work with businesses, running well-being programs for them and their employees. And as well, I work one-on-one with people with mentoring or coaching, whatever it is that they need in their lives. And then I teach meditation as well and mindfulness. So a big array of things that I offer. And it's all about understanding that we're all unique and that we all need to embark on our unique journey to be well and to live more consciously. And that is my aim a lot of times, is share some of the things that help me to see if they can support them in their own journey.
It's fascinating. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about is with the time you spent in the United States, did you learn much about our healthcare system and how it operates? And then the reason why I ask is just because I wanted to discover, based upon where you grew up in Argentina, I'm sure it was different than the United States. And then how does that contrast to where you are now in New Zealand? Because just by the nature of you, what you're teaching at the university, and by the nature of your work, it's unique work, right? And especially in the United States, it would be, I wouldn't say strange work. I would just say it's very rare. So it's hard to find people like you in the United States. And so I'd just be fascinated to learn from your perspective, how does the healthcare system in Argentina compared to the States, and then how does that the States and Argentina compare to New Zealand?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I learned whilst living in the US is that the US is like the Western society on steroids, in a sense. It's like
Right.
everything is bigger, everything is more accentuated. Now, in Argentina, in New Zealand, in the places in Europe that I lived in the US, most of the Western style health system is very similar. You have a problem, they check the symptoms, and they deal with the symptoms, whether that's surgery, a pill, or things like that. It's very rare that they actually look at the root cause of things. Um, I tend to talk about the health system as a sick system and not a health system.
Yeah.
That's their business to keep us in a place that we're actually not healing. There's a lot of amazing things. This is not like saying negative things about the system itself and fully, because there's a lot of amazing people. There's a lot of amazing physicians, doctors, practitioners that practice conventional Western medicine, and they do amazing things. And at the same time, it's not a holistic approach.
Right.
So when we understand that that's the case, we need to decide a lot of times, and this is what has been my path, and this is what I share, is more of a preventative medicine, or more of a preventative lifestyle, instead
Yeah.
of having to get to the place where we actually need to deal with the symptoms, because in order to just function, we need to deal with the symptoms. Now, in the US and even in every other country that I live, there's always people that can't access really fully to the health system. And it really is a shame that this is not a universal healthcare for everyone, and that it's done in a holistic way that actually teaches people how to prevent things from happening, how to heal trauma, how to heal the root causes, how to heal ourselves, our mind, our body, our spirit, our energy system. When we're able to actually understand more of that, then we're going to be better ourselves, and we're going to be better as a society. Because this is one of the key
Right.
things that I often see, is that if I am not well, I'm not going to be well in relationship to you or in relationship to anyone.
That's right.
And
That's
if I'm not well, which is majority of people, I'm going to actually be on survival mode. And if I am on survival mode, there's no chance for me to see like your uniqueness. There's no way for me to see your gifts and your love and your compassion and your worthiness. All that I'm going to see is what I need to do to survive. And I'm not even going to see my own loving kindness, worthiness space. This rat race, or this living on autopilot thing that we have going on for majority of people in society, it's a challenge that we need to change fully how we are living, to understand how do we live well. And the ones that we are privileged to be able to embark on that journey, I do believe that it is part of my mission to expand this and to share this with others, so that then others can decide for themselves, do they want to keep on living the life that they are living, or can they see that it is possible within the same circumstances or parameters or similar circumstances to live well. Like moving from being completely stressed out in autopilot to living stress free and knowing how to manage our circumstances and our responses to life instead of reacting all of the time.
Yeah, there's so many things to unpack that you had just mentioned, because I love the fact that what you were talking about, the differences between the U.S. Western medicine system and others, is really, it's a vast difference. And like you said, there's lots of doctors and nurses and health practitioners that are amazing. They're all highly educated. They're really smart people, and they've been well trained. They're just well trained in a totally different way, right? Like you even grew up with such a unique experience by having parents who encouraged you to go to these alternative therapies, I would call it, right? As you were younger. And geez, I was more interested in playing video games, right? When I was a young kid. So I applaud
Yeah,
you
sure.
for experimenting and learning those types of things. And because it's awesome to see how now you've transitioned that into helping people holistically, which I think is a lost art in the United States, is because it's not even a lost art. It was a hidden art. And I think that they really attacked it on purpose. And it's been really frustrating because back in the early 1900s, about half of our practitioners were holistic practitioners, right? That's
Yeah.
a lot. But now you look at that percentage and it's 0.1%, right? It's not even not even 1%.
Yeah.
And so it was a specific attack on the all natural health practitioners that happened, and our medical system was taken over, and they did it for nefarious reasons, which is frustrating. But and we're in a really bad system, in my little opinion, about where we are, because we need more people like you that talk about how can we help you as a holistic person, right? And then how can we find the root cause of what's causing your issues, so that we can resolve that root cause, which is then going to help you with other things. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, in the United States, we say, okay, you've got a heart issue, you go to a heart doctor, and that cardiologist is amazing at what he does, but he just talks about your heart and what it's doing now, and might not help you understand what is causing that particular issue and problem. And it may be some other type of practitioner who you need to go see and help. And I'm not saying they don't refer people to there. It's just they're just narrow-minded, and they're not, I wouldn't even say narrow-minded. They're just
Yeah.
focused
They are
on,
specialized.
yeah, they're so specialized. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So,
And you, Rob,
I know probably preaching to the choir, but
yeah.
I love what you do. So thank you.
No, I think that one of the things is understand. This is one of the things that I tell a lot of times to people, especially those that we live more of a conventional Western style life, is that if we talk a lot about alternative medicine, the alternative medicine is our conventional medical system. This isn't like a historically used system. This is quite new. Like the Western style that we have of medicine is less than 200 years old.
Right.
For thousands and thousands of years, the methodologies that now we call alternative have been the ways of how we deal with everything. And of course, different traditions have explored specific methods and their own lens and everything. And I think that the beauty of these times that we have now is that as we are more connected and globally connected, we can actually explore, as I did, things that are not part of our own tradition or our own culture. We can travel, we can learn,
Right.
we can explore, and we can actually analyze and think through our own curiosity. Does this make sense or not? Does it make sense to just look at one specific part of my body instead of looking at my body as a whole and
Right.
how things interact with each other? So not even just, as you were saying, if someone has an issue with their heart, not even just looking at the heart itself. The heart is in interaction with the brain, the heart is in interaction with every other organ, the heart is in interaction with their
The gut.
energy, with their
Yeah.
stress, with their life circumstances. Even if someone actually, let's call it, fixes the heart, then how is that in relationship with everything else? And how are we preventing whatever issue there was to not come back? Because if we just deal with the symptoms, we're not dealing with the whole being. And saying that, there's a lot of amazing people in the US that do these kind of things. There's like explorations and everything. It's just that we need to look for it, because
Yeah,
majority,
it's
it's
definitely
a little
not.
bit shut, and it's
Yeah,
not, because our society that is run a lot of things through our financial systems, unfortunately, holistic medicine and actually healing doesn't make money.
yeah, exactly.
Eventually
That
doesn't make money.
literally, yeah, you follow the money and you look at. I was just watching the some track races. It's called the Olympic trials, the
Mm.
United States Olympic trials. So it's athletes that are trying to vie for our Olympic team for Paris, and it's really fun to watch because they're amazing athletes. But every other commercial is a commercial for a drug, and it's not like people are buying those drugs because they're being advertised. They're just these big pharmaceutical companies are buying up all the ad space to spend money with these stations to, and so it's just the money is just incredible how powerful that give makes them. And so
Mm.
it's really frustrating because you can't can you imagine a holistic doctor and or practitioner and or practice just doing a commercial on TV. Even it just doesn't happen because financially
Well,
this doesn't work out.
it happens a little bit, and I do want to say something about, like, for those listening, because I tell this to a lot of my clients and my students. If at some point we have an acute issue, take the pill. Don't
Oh
You don't
yeah,
have to endure the pain if you're actually in pain. We want to get to a place that we feel well enough if we are dealing with some symptom to actually
hmm
then go and deal with the root cause of that. Now,
right.
the pill by itself is not going to solve it, it's just going to mask it. But if
That's
someone is in pain at this moment, go and take the pill for that before we deal with it during like a meditation practice or mindfulness practice or a healing practice. It doesn't matter. We need to figure out how, like, working with it, but take the pill if you're dealing with that. Now, if you're not dealing with that, go and explore how to heal. Go and explore how to deal with your emotions, with your trauma, with your self doubt, with your stress. Go and do that, because then that is going to prevent you from taking things. I haven't been sick in over 17 years.
wow. That's amazing. That's
I haven't
amazing.
had to take a
Great
day
job.
off. Every time that I remember starting working at some place like university or other places, they ask me, "So what do we do when you're sick? Is there someone that come and cover you?" And I'm like, "What do you mean when I'm sick?"
I love that. Yeah, you're like
And
this doesn't happen with me.
and it's not that, like, I'm not perfect. I'm still working on myself. I'm healing a lot of different things. But
Right.
there's a level of understanding that I had that allowed me, whenever I start to, now, of course, not when I was a kid, when I start to hear my body giving me a signal that something is not balanced, I listen to it, I pay attention to it, and I do something about that.
Nice.
So I
Nice.
keep on practicing every single day to develop greater awareness of my own experience, so that I can listen to that first knock that my body is telling me, instead of having to wait until, like, it's been knocking for years and I haven't heard it, and then I'm sick and I'm in a hospital.
Yeah.
This is an ongoing daily practice. Of course, there are certain levels that it gets easier just through the years and the practice. I keep on telling people, I got here where I am because I've been for over 20 years doing this.
Right. Right.
Don't compare yourself. Like, I tell this a lot of times to my students at university. Don't compare yourself now to me now, because I've been doing this for over 20 years.
Right. Right.
And you just heard this for the first time ever.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
So compare yourself if you want, which we don't want to compare ourselves with anyone. But if you do want to compare yourself to the kid that started, that was completely stressed out, that was with a lot of anger, that was with road rage, compare yourself to that version of me if you want to
Right. There you
compare.
go. There you go. Yeah, I love it. I love it. So this is fun. Let's transition to. I thank you for that conversation. It's just one of those things that's really important to me because I feel that we need to educate people that hey, there are alternatives in the United States to help people holistically and naturally, and big pharma is hiding a lot of that information from us. So that's part of my story. Is just get it out. Let's get people
Mm.
out there. Let's help them understand that there are ways that they can do it. And the beautiful thing about the internet now is right. I can interview you in New Zealand and we can have conversations about how to help people, and you can even do healing sessions remotely and all these fun amazing things that weren't available to us, at least when I was growing up. Didn't have that ability. So it's fascinating. Why don't you just transition just to tell me some stories about people you have worked with and how have you helped some folks?
Yeah, so I have so many stories through the years,
I'll bet.
but for example, like I remember one woman that came to see me because her business that she was starting wasn't like actually flowing, like she was stuck. And so she came to work with me on that side just to unstuck what was holding her business from actually working. And what through working with her, after a few sessions, I realized that the blockage wasn't about the business, it was about her and a trauma that she had when she was a kid because she had been sexually abused when she was a kid.
Uh,
And that was actually what was preventing her from actually building the business that she wanted.
wow.
So we worked on healing that trauma. And once that happened, her business just took off.
Wow. That's
And this is where, as an example of a holistic experience, she came to work on her business and we healed a sexually abused trauma that she had or forgotten about. She repressed that memory,
right.
and healing that is what actually allowed her business to grow. Then I had another person, for example, that she hadn't been in contact with her family, with her parents for over 9 years. They had a fallout, like they weren't talking. And she came and she did a healing session. And after the healing session, which we explored healing her relationship with them and
Okay.
forgiving them and asking for forgiveness, that evening, the father called her after 9 years of being completely zero communication. The father called her. And I told her the following day when she told me this, I told her, this is when we do healing for ourselves like that. The father, even if he didn't know that she was doing that, somehow he knew and he reached out because she had actually forgiven, and that allowed the father to reach out.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's really interesting.
There's there's stories that I have of people that they are not allowing themselves to be in relationship with others because
Okay.
what they actually learned, and this is completely unconsciously, they don't know that this is what they learned, is that someone in their family actually went through a, a challenging experience because they were either in relationship or they were, let's call it, beautiful aesthetically, and they were traumatized because they were abused. And the mechanism that then their descendant developed is that if they actually repel everyone and they don't have any relationship, they are preventing a potential trauma of being abused, because if they are actually not allowing anyone to come near, then there's no choice, there's no perspective or no allowing for that pain to take place.
So they're
You
doing
know,
that subconsciously, is what you're saying.
yes.
Yeah.
So I work with some people like understanding that and understand, well, of course we are all different, and but for some of these people that I work with, we realize that someone in their family a few generations ago had that. So therefore we were able to heal that so that then they open up to finding a relationship with someone.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
When we're able to explore these things a lot of times, it's magical. And for me, a lot of times, what I see, I keep on being amazed every single day of my work because I get to see people transform. And for some
That's
people, it's like this, and for some people, it's a process. It takes months, it takes years.
right.
It's amazing to see how people can actually heal, how people can be more aligned, how people can actually allow their business to grow, their relationships to grow, their relationship to their kids to be better just by doing healing work and to be more mindful and more aware every single day.
That's awesome. That's awesome. If someone came to you like in pain, for example, and you said, "Okay, we're going," what would you do? Like, how would you start that conversation, and then what would you do during a session, and then maybe just give us one example from a pain relief perspective. Someone says, "Hey, I've got this pain, and I've had it for a long time." How do you start that conversation?
Depending on the approach that they want to take and what they're open to, and I
Okay.
in the conversation I explore that because some people are open to energy healing, some people
Hmm.
are perhaps never
Right.
have done
They're
that,
like,
so they have a little of a wall in there. I get a sense of where they are and understanding what's the right approach, especially initially. So
okay.
for some people it might be okay, we need to talk about it and we need to work rewiring the brain. For some people, it's let's look at the energy behind this. Where is this coming from? Is this coming from your own life, your childhood? Is this coming from your ancestors? Where is this energetic coming from? And then, depending on what it is, and depending on how people are open to exploring it, we either explore it through the mind, through the body, through the energy. We're all different, and
Yeah.
one of the
Yeah.
things that I explored for myself, and one of the things of why I decided to learn so many different traditions and methodologies, is so that I can actually show up and be okay with you at this moment. We need to work in this way. Like I had the other day someone that came to see me and they shared what was going on with them, and we I introduced the energy healing perspective, and I already sensed that they put their guard up. So I was like, okay, I didn't even tell them anything. I just redirected the conversation, and we worked on that with the body through some movements and with the mind, rewiring and seeing what that was from another perspective. And now, depending on how the process goes, we might, little by little, as they start to trust that what we are doing actually is working, they might relax their the boundary that they have and the limitation to work on it energetically. And if they don't,
Right.
then cool, we keep on working on it in this way. But if they
Gotcha.
are, we explore that. Again, we're all different, and the journey for everyone is going to be different. I
Right.
every time
Well,
I work a lot with people in the US remotely, or whenever I go over there every year, and I get to work with some people in just one session. That's it. We explore one specific issue, and they are open, and we did it. And with some people, it's okay. Let's do like a lot of sessions to explore
right.
this because sometimes it's a process. We need to
Makes sense.
unlearn so many different things that it takes perhaps months or years. I've been in this journey for over 20 years, and I
Right.
will keep
Right.
on going until the day that I die.
There you go. That's so fascinating. So, if you can we just say, like, what are the top five types of things that you use? Like energy healing, you mentioned, like what are the other major ones? It's just so that I can get my mind, because you've been trained in lots of things over the 20 years, right? But what are the top five, do you think?
So, mindfulness or meditation. So, it's just working through the mind. Energy
Okay.
healing. I learned a few different techniques around the world of energy healing, sound healing, the vibration of the different instruments, the gongs, the singing bowls. They are amazing to also support that healing. Somatic healing. So, using the body and the movement of the body to heal. And then
Okay.
ancestral healing. I use a form that it's called systemic family constellations. But those five, I would say, they are the main things out of everything else that I do.
That's really cool. So the last one I didn't catch very well just because of my not very good at your language. So say the last one again, just so I can make sure I get it right.
So it's systemic family constellations.
Systemic family constellations. Interesting. I
Yes.
haven't heard of that one yet. That's interesting. So, just since I haven't heard of it, explain just a little. You explained a little bit. Just go a little bit deeper for me, just so I can understand that one a little bit, because I have not heard that one before, and I'm very curious.
What we understand is that whatever happened in the past to our
Uh,
ancestors gets passed down, whether through the DNA and the genes or energetically, whichever of the two perspectives you want, things get passed down. So when we understand that, in a sense, we are entangled to those that came before us, as I mentioned before, someone that something happened to someone in their
uh,
family, and now
right,
they are
right.
behaving unconsciously according to that. So a
Yeah,
lot of our patterns of behaviors, a lot of our mechanisms of defense, a lot of our tendencies actually are
come
because
from
of
that.
those that came before. So
That
when
makes
we're able
sense.
to explore that, we understand that energetic entanglement or physical entanglement that we have, if we actually heal this, we can actually choose now how we want to live, and we don't need to do what they did. So a lot of
Got
times it's easy for people to see when there are patterns in the families, like we all behave the same way. It's easier to see that. But even if not everyone is behaving in the same way, there's things of those that came before. So there's always trauma from those that came before us. It doesn't matter how long ago. I
uh,
work with some people. Last week I had a session with someone, and the person that we need to actually do the healing work was someone 8 generations ago. They have no
wow.
idea who that person is. That's the person that we need to actually explore.
That's incredible. Wow.
So it's understanding that, again, holistic perspective, that
Yeah.
which came before has an impact on us.
That's really intriguing. So it's really cool that you've been trained on so many different modalities and ways to help people. It's really exciting. We could probably spend an hour on each one of those areas, if not more. We probably spend days on each one of those. But I am so excited just that you were able to spend a little bit of time with us to explain what you do and how you do it. How do people get a hold of you if they're interested in getting work or understanding more about you? What's the best way for people to contact you?
Yeah, so my name, Brian Bernaman, so brianbernaman.com, or on social media, Brian Bernaman. Find me there, message me there if anything of this resonates. As I mentioned, I work in person, I work remotely, I work as a one off, I work on processes. If anyone actually resonates with anything and are interested, go and check out a little bit more information. And if you have any questions, just send a message.
Perfect, perfect. So I'll make sure that I have your social media accounts and your website on the show notes so that people can access it and find you. Just because I think there's going to be people that are very fascinated with what you do and want to learn more. So I'm sure you'll get some people to connect with you that way. But geez, Brian, what a pleasure to have you. And again, we should do this again because I know that we could go through and just dive deep into one of those or all of those issues over time. So it's just fascinating. Thank you for taking so much time and spending it just educating us on some of these really important topics. Right? It's like our health is so important, and doing it naturally and faithfully is as I like to call it is just so important, and we need people like you. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for your contribution to society. And it looks like you're going to just continue to help thousands, if not tens of thousands of people in the future. So thank you for what
Thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you for the space. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for. I think that a lot of times, the more, as you said, the more that we can share these messages, the more that we can educate people just with different perspectives and allow people to choose how they want to live their lives and to choose
Right.
something different and to know that there is perhaps a different way of living that is
That's
not
right.
what they are used to. This is important. So thank you for having me and thank you for giving me a space to share.
You bet. It's an important message that I want people to understand, right? There's a lot more to our health than just a pill for an ill. And so let's go find those root causes. And even if it's eight centuries ago, that's I think that's the record for me of how far to go back. So that's incredible. But anyway, Brian, thanks a ton for your time. And
Thank you.
with that, we're going to sign off from the I Am Pain Free podcast. We'll talk next week. If you enjoyed in this episode, you might be expecting a sales pitch for a pain relief solution. But here's a pleasant surprise. I'm offering a 3-episode pop-up podcast absolutely free. This exclusive 3-episode private podcast series is packed with more value than many paid programs out there. And getting access to this is a breeze. If you're listening on your phone, simply open up your text messaging app and send the word pain free. It can be 1 or 2 words to 41 pain free. So that's 417-246-3733. Again, that's 417-246-3733. If you're not a fan of texting, no big deal, right? Just visit impainfree.com. Super easy. impainfree.com. You can access this private podcast series instantly for no cost. Right? This isn't just any podcast series. We call it Beyond Pain, the triple B blueprint for pain-free existence. It really is a treasure trove of secrets, expert interviews, and a resource vault, all aimed at guiding you to live pain-free naturally and faithfully, right? My passion. It's a rare and value-packed resource that we're thrilled to share with you. So don't wait. Just grab that cell phone, grab your text messaging app, type pain-free in there, and just send it to 417-246-3733. Or, like I mentioned, go to impainfree.com and unlock this exclusive content, all completely free. God bless.